That was Justice Minister Sean Fraser today talking about legislation that the Liberal government has tabled, which would amend the criminal code to target hate crimes. Now, here are the new offenses that would be created. Make it a crime to make someone afraid of accessing religious or cultural institution. There would also be a crime to obstruct or interfere with access to a similar institution. The legislation would also make hate-motivated crime a specific offense. Lastly, it would be a crime to willfully promote hatred against an identifiable group by displaying hate symbols in public. Now, this is the first of 3 justice reforms the Liberal government has signaled that it will be tabling. Fraser says bail reform is coming next month, and it also comes a day after Conservative Frank Caputo tabled a private member's bill which would make murder of an intimate partner first-degree murder. So what does this say about the Carney government and where they are going in this fall session? Let's ask the front bench. We've got Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, and Carl Boulanger. Now, Melanie, Pierre Poilievre has been talking about being tough on crime for months now. So what does it say to you that the Liberals are moving on it now?
Well, it definitely says that they want to stop Pierre Poilievre's moves on the board. They want to take these chips off, the chess piece off the board from Pierre Poilievre, because he's very effective when it comes to crime. And this is an issue set that he certainly is strong on. But folks who've watched the show for a long time will know that I'm deeply cynical. And while I think that this move on hate crime is incredibly necessary, we've seen a huge rise in Islamophobia and certainly anti-Semitism, tremendous rise in that. So we definitely need to make a move on this. But the timing is a bit suspicious to me. And I'm forced to remember that last year, the Liberals lost in their by-election Toronto-St. Paul, which is a riding with a very large Jewish population because of this issue. And they're coming up to a by-election that they're going to have to call in University of Rosedale, which is the next riding over for Chrystia Freeland. And so I have to think that that was one of the motivators in putting this forward right now.
Declaring your cynicism before giving your opinion is always appreciated. Mel, I think you were a ray of sunshine on this panel, so don't sell yourself short there. Sabrina, the Liberals did signal that they were doing this summer. Does that give them some cover that they aren't just trying to copy another party's notes here?
Yeah, I think it was a smart move to introduce this legislation, though I think the rollout of it is going to be interesting. And so if you listen to the press conference with Fraser, there's still a lot of questions about how it's actually going to be implemented, and I think that's what's going to be most important. I also think that while legislation is important, and it's very key for law enforcement to be able to have some of these measures and have some of these tools in their tool belt in order to be able to enforce hate crime legislation or protect citizens who are experiencing hate crime. The thing that's most important that's driving this is the polarization of politics, right? Like, the more that we have polarized rhetoric, the more that we have these really divided approaches to things that are happening in our borders, but also things that are happening around the world. That's what drives this. And so I don't know how we're actually going to reduce hate crime in that sense, because that's why people are being targeted. And so I think the legislation is important, but I think that there's a broader context that needs to be considered here.
Carl, what do you think of Sabrina's point that getting to the root cause maybe is not what this is going to address, or even how legislation could possibly prevent?
Yeah, I mean, is it a legal problem or an enforcement problem? I mean, there are lots of hate crimes being committed right now in this country. They're not prosecuted, they're not investigated. There's not enough resources to go through all of them, targeting the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the LGBTQ communities, others across the country. So it feels like they're tinkering. It's like, we're going to change the legislation, we're going to tinker, but what is it going to do actually to stop hate crime? If we don't put resources to deal with it, it's not going to amount to much, and it's not going to change anything.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Melanie, but I also can't help but think, and again, this is not my cynicism, but just trying to look at, what things are showing us out there, and polls clearly indicating that the trade war isn't really top of mind anymore. So do you think that this is partly that as well, realizing that, yes, we have a problem, but at the same time, this government is maybe looking at the issue set in front of them and saying, maybe we need to move somewhere else as we work on different topics, but at the same time, crime is something that a lot of Canadians care about now.
Absolutely, crime is huge amongst Canadians, especially Canadian women right now. There are people who are very concerned about home invasions, about violent crime, the perceived rise of crime across the country, and people not feeling safe in their own houses or having the ability to protect themselves. Mark Carney has made comments about bail reform. There seems to be a promise lingering out there that there's going to be legislation related to bail reform introduced this fall. I think that they may be holding off on bail reform until they figure out the budgeting side of it, because one of the realities that no one seems to be talking about right now with bail reform is it's going to necessitate that we build more prisons. We currently have an overflowing number of people. Part of the reason why there's a revolving door is there's no space in our prisons. And so we're going to need to build more, and that's not a very sexy thing to put in the budget. But with bail reform is going to come the necessity to make that kind of a big strategic investment, and at the provincial level as well, because these aren't just federal crimes.
Yeah, Sabrina, talk about that sort of balancing act and knowing that the budget is coming November 4th.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that last point that Mel just made, and it ties to what Carl said when it comes to the enforcement piece. Provinces are not investing enough in crime, and when the perception of crime is going up, crime itself has typically either stayed neutral or gone down in the last 2 years based on some of the statistics that have been released. But provinces are not investing the adequate resources into the policing court system to make sure that they can target this issue at their levels, right? So you look at Alberta. Alberta had a legal aid crisis this year. Alberta has a number of other provincial crises when it comes to enforcement and crime. And so we can't just look to the federal government to change policy and say, well, that's going to solve the problem if provinces refuse to meet the issue with dollars. And I think that has to be something that the Carney government encourages provinces to do, because otherwise you're going to have a gap between what the policy is and where the funding is.
Got about 20 seconds, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, provincial governments have choices to make. Are they going to build 10 new schools, 1 hospital, or 2 prisons? I mean, that's the reality of the budgetary choices they're facing, and you know where they're going.
Yeah, the math just is going to have to math. Okay, Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Belanger, thank you all for being here.